Hi, I'm Maribel. They told me my father had a stroke, that I needed to rush to the hospital alone. But when I got there, a nurse grabbed my wrist and whispered, "Don't go in, hide, and trust me." So I did. I froze behind the next room's door, and through that narrow gap, I saw my brother leaning over Dad's IV, pouring something in, whispering, "Just a few more days and everything will be mine." That was the moment I knew. This wasn't a tragedy, it was a plan. And what came next changed everything I thought I knew about my family. Before we begin, tell me, what would you do if the people who shared your blood wanted your father dead? The wipers squeaked across the windshield, barely keeping up with the downpour. Headlights danced across puddles like ghosts. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly my fingers ached, but I didn't dare loosen them. I kept replaying the voice message over and over in my head, clipped, robotic, emotionless. "Your father's condition has worsened. You should come now." I barely noticed the lights of downtown Houston as I sped past. Rain blurred everything. My mouth moved without sound. "Please, not tonight, not like this." The hospital came into view, familiar but now feeling like the edge of a cliff I wasn't ready to fall from. I pulled into the emergency entrance, slammed the gear into park, and ran. No umbrella, no jacket. Just me and the rain. The glass doors whooshed open. Inside, everything was too still, too calm. The smell hit me first: antiseptic, bleach, plastic. A cold kind of clean that always made my skin crawl. I looked around, heart racing, soaked through. My shoes squeaked on the tile floor. Behind the desk, a receptionist barely lifted her eyes. She fumbled with a clipboard. "Family of Mr. Drayton. Wait here, please." Her tone was flat. Too flat. I opened my mouth to ask something, anything, when a woman appeared. A nurse, mid-30s maybe, pale skin, brown hair pulled too tight. Her badge read Linda. Her eyes, wild, alert, locked on mine. She stepped close, fast, too fast. "Don't go in," she whispered, grabbing my wrist. Her grip was strong. "Hide. Trust me." "What?" She didn't let me finish. She pulled me with surprising strength down the hallway, around a corner, and shoved open a supply closet. My back hit the wall, the smell of latex gloves and bleach overwhelming. She left the door ajar, just wide enough to peer out. "Stay quiet, please." Her voice was trembling now. I didn't understand, not at first. My mind raced. Then I heard it. Shoes, male voices, low. One of them laughed, softly, cruelly. From my sliver of vision, I saw him. Caleb, my brother. He walked into Dad's ICU room like he owned it. His coat was damp, but he moved slow, deliberate. His face was expressionless, like he was there to do a job, not visit his dying father. He pulled something from his coat, a syringe. No, 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 no. He leaned over the IV bag, inserted the needle, slowly pushed something clear into it. I covered my mouth with my hand, holding in the scream clawing at my throat. And then his voice, calm, cold. "Just a few more days, and everything will be mine." The floor beneath me disappeared. My stomach turned. My ears roared. I pressed harder against the wall like I could melt into it. He stepped back, tucked the syringe into his pocket, and looked around, casual, like this was just another task on a list. Then he left. Just walked out. I wanted to scream, to run after him, to tackle him to the floor, and demand to know what the hell he was doing. But my feet wouldn't move. The air felt thicker now, like grief and betrayal had mass, had shape, pressing down on me. Caleb, my older brother, the one who always sat at Dad's right side, the golden boy, the chosen one. I remembered birthdays where Dad only spoke to Caleb, Sunday dinners where I tried to make conversation and got nods while Caleb got applause. Still, I never thought, this. I thought he was ambitious, sure, but not a killer, not my brother. Behind me, Linda spoke again, softer this time. If you want to save him, you must act, but not now. I looked at her, really looked at her. She wasn't panicked. She was resolute, like someone who had been watching this storm build for a long time. Why would he, I started, my voice cracking. Because he thinks no one sees him, she said. He thinks he's untouchable. You walking in right now, he'll spin it, make you the problem. I swallowed hard. My hands were shaking. Then what do I do? You disappear, she said. Let them think your father is dying naturally. For now. The weight of it hit me then. What I'd just witnessed, what it meant. If I told someone now, without proof, they'd call me crazy, over-emotional, the quiet daughter, the unreliable one. But if I stayed quiet and watched, maybe I'd find a way to stop him for good. I took a deep breath and stepped out of the closet. Caleb was gone. The hallway was empty again, like nothing had happened, but everything had changed. Linda looked at me one last time. You saw what I saw, she said. Now it's your move. I didn't answer. I couldn't. I walked out of the hospital through the same sliding doors I'd come in, rain still falling. And in that moment, I didn't know it then, but hiding that night would change everything about who I thought I was. I didn't sleep. Not really. I laid on the couch with the TV still buzzing in the corner, my eyes burning from the fluorescent glare of the kitchen light I forgot to turn off. Morning didn't arrive. It bled in slowly. My head was still spinning from last night, from what I saw, from what I didn't want to believe. But it wasn't the silence that pulled me out of my haze. It was his voice. My father was a brave man, Caleb said, his tone composed, every syllable measured. I turned toward the screen. There he was, sitting in the studio chair like he'd been rehearsing for weeks. His tie was charcoal, his eyes red-rimmed but dry. We're praying for his recovery. He's always been a fighter. Liar. The words punched through the quiet of my apartment. I hadn't changed clothes. My coffee had gone cold, untouched, but it was the weight in my chest that paralyzed me, the weight of knowing the man on my screen wasn't grieving. He was covering his tracks. I leaned closer. His hands were folded in front of him. His voice dropped slightly. My sister's struggling. This has been hard on her. She's sensitive. Sensitive? That was code. That was Caleb painting me as unstable before I even opened my mouth. He was laying the foundation in public before I had a chance to speak. My skin crawled. The phone buzzed. A message lit up the screen. Linda, meet me at 9 a.m. Don't come through the main entrance. I stared at the words for a moment, then grabbed my keys. By 8:45, I was parked near the loading dock behind the hospital, heart hammering in my chest like it had nowhere else to go. The sky was dull, heavy with gray clouds. Rain lingered in the cracks of the pavement. I stayed in the car for a beat, watching people shuffle in and out of side doors, none of them Linda. Then I saw her. She stood under the narrow awning of the staff exit, hair tucked into a bun, her eyes flicking from side to side. She looked like someone who had everything to lose. I stepped out and walked toward her slowly, my sneakers silent against the damp asphalt. Linda didn't greet me. She handed me a sealed manila folder. Inside, tucked tightly between stiff pages, was a small USB drive. There's a 5-minute backup feed, she said under her breath. From a secondary security loop. It's not perfect, but it caught enough. My fingers tightened around the folder. You mean, Linda gave a curt nod. What he did last night? You weren't imagining it, but listen to me carefully. Don't open that drive here, and don't let anyone know I gave it to you. He thinks the footage is gone, Let's keep it that way. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Her hand briefly touched my elbow. Be smart, she whispered. Then she turned and disappeared back into the hospital. I walked back to my car in a daze. Everything around me, the buildings, the cars, the distant wail of a siren, felt far away, like I was underwater. But inside, a fire had started. I opened the glove compartment and tucked the folder deep behind old receipts and expired insurance cards. As I slid into the driver's seat, an old memory burst through the fog. Me, on a bright Saturday morning. I was 6, wobbling down the sidewalk on a pink bicycle, streamers flapping from the handlebars. My father's voice in the background, "You've got it, Mari! Don't stop!" Then Caleb's voice, teasing and loud, chasing me like a shadow. "You'll never keep up, Mari." Back then, it was a joke. Big brothers teased. But now it felt like a script he'd been perfecting for years. A slow campaign to make me smaller, quieter, less believable. And I'd let him paint me into the corner of every family photograph, the one who stood behind while he stood at the center. But not anymore. I made my way inside through the ICU's side entrance around 10. I kept my head down, nodded at a nurse, and slipped into my father's room without making a sound. He was still there, pale, still. The monitors beeped steadily, a cold reminder that he was here, but not really. I walked to his bedside, heart aching. Then I heard the door open behind me. "You shouldn't be in here." Caleb's voice, smooth, controlled. I didn't turn around immediately. "He's my father." "I didn't say he wasn't," he said, stepping closer. "But stress isn't good for him, or for you." I finally looked at him. His hair was perfectly combed, shirt unwrinkled, tie pinned straight. He looked like he'd come from a photo shoot, not a hospital. "I just needed a moment," I said. He studied me. "You look tired." There was something off in his smile, too tight, too calculated. "I wanted to tell him something," I said, backing away slowly. "Then tell him, and go." His tone wasn't angry. It was firm, like I was a guest at his event. I glanced at the IV line, that faint chemical smell again. My stomach turned. He left the room without another word, his footsteps echoing down the hall like a warning shot. I reached out and touched my father's hand, cold, limp. My eyes stung. "I'll protect you this time," I whispered. "No matter what it takes." My phone buzzed. Another message. Linda. "They're moving him tonight." I looked back at the hallway where Caleb had just disappeared, then down at the man who raised me. They think he's dying naturally, but I knew better now. I thought I was protecting him, but that night I learned how deep the betrayal went. It started with a folder, yellow, innocent-looking. I was sitting in my car outside my father's law office, engine still running, hands frozen on the steering wheel. The building loomed in front of me like it always had. Cold, sharp-edged, all glass and silence. It was strange how a place filled with so many of his decisions could feel like it had never belonged to him. It belonged to Caleb now. I reached for the folder Linda had slipped me. My fingers hesitated before opening it. I don't know what I expected. Maybe part of me still hoped there'd be a misunderstanding, a missing page, a technicality, something to explain the ugliness I was about to see. But the moment I opened it, my heart dropped. A printed copy of Dad's updated estate plan stared back at me. Signed and dated 3 months ago. Executor, Caleb Drayton. I flipped pages quickly. My name, gone. Not a mention, not even in the footnotes. Gone like I never mattered. Gone like I never existed. A dull pressure started in my temples. I pressed the back of my head against the headrest, trying to breathe through the sting in my eyes. And then I remembered. It was the last time all of us were together in that boardroom. Dad, Caleb, a few trustees, and me. That room always felt like a mausoleum. Dark wood, long windows, and that massive portrait of my mother that Caleb insisted stay hung right behind his chair. He said it reminded him of her strength, but I always thought he liked the way her eyes seemed to watch everything from behind his shoulder. I had taken the same seat I always did, off to the side in the folding chair nobody ever seemed to think about. Everyone else had padded leather. I had cold metal. Caleb had called the meeting, said we needed to talk about the future. What he meant was his future. He started walking the room through numbers, talking about the foundation, the medical investments, the restructuring. Everyone nodded like bobbleheads. I waited, listening, biting my tongue. But when he mentioned redirecting funds, foundational funds, away from the hospice programs Dad had championed, I spoke up. I think Dad would want transparency about that decision, I said, quietly but firmly. The room went still. Caleb didn't miss a beat. He smiled, leaning back like he'd been waiting for me to speak. Marie, he said, voice syrupy sweet. Let's keep this practical. You're not really involved on the financial side of things. There was a pause, and I turned to Dad, hoping he'd step in, even just to clarify. But he looked down. He adjusted his watch and said nothing. That was the moment I knew. My presence was tolerated, not valued. Back in the car, I squeezed the folder so hard the metal clasp on my ring dug into my palm. I didn't feel it at first. I just stared at the paper, the ink, the signature that proved my father had signed off, on erasing me. Years I spent, driving him to checkups, organizing his prescriptions, chasing down Caleb's mistakes so Dad wouldn't have to worry. I whispered out loud, voice raw, "You made me invisible." I didn't cry, not right then. Something colder settled in. It took half an hour to drive home. The sky had turned gunmetal gray and rain was falling in steady, unbroken lines. The kind of rain that didn't splash, just soaked. I sat at a red light, barely blinking. The windshield wipers squeaked back and forth like a broken metronome. I looked into the rearview mirror. What I saw wasn't who I remembered. The woman staring back at me looked small. Not physically, but emotionally worn down, bent under years of being overlooked, dismissed, smoothed over. But something was different this time. I didn't look away. I looked myself straight in the eyes and said out loud, "No more folding chairs." When I pulled into the driveway, the rain was still falling. I didn't rush. I didn't even grab an umbrella. I just walked in. I tossed my keys on the counter, slid the USB Linda gave me into a drawer, and sat down in front of the TV again. Not to watch the news, but because I needed silence. It didn't last. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "You should see what he's planning next." There was a photo attached. It showed Caleb standing outside the Family Foundation office, shaking hands with a man I recognized. Our father's old lawyer. They were both smiling. Caleb had his other hand tucked casually in his pocket, like he had all the time in the world. My jaw locked. I stared at the image until the screen dimmed. He's not just after control, he's rewriting the story, replacing history with his own version. My voice barely came out, but it was there. He's not just taking our father's life, he's taking his legacy. I didn't know it yet, but someone else inside that hospital was helping him. I started noticing it in the smallest ways. A paper cup switched at the last second. A glance passed between two nurses, too quick to mean nothing. And then there was the envelope, yellowed, sealed, with my name written in my father's handwriting. It was nearly sunrise when I walked into the hospital cafeteria. My legs felt like stone. I hadn't slept in 36 hours. The air was thick with the smell of burnt coffee and disinfectant, sharp and strange. I stood there for a moment, trying to remember what I even came in for. Food? Coffee? or maybe just 5 minutes away from the hum of machines and the tension in my chest. My hand reached for a paper cup on the counter, but before I could touch it, a nurse I didn't recognize grabbed it. "That one's not for you," she said too fast. She set it aside and handed me another. I looked at her. She wouldn't meet my eyes, just turned and walked off. I stared at the first cup. The hospital's logo printed on it was smudged slightly, as if someone had handled it with wet gloves. A small red speck stained the rim. I didn't take the second cup either. Instead, I walked out, tossing both into the trash without a word. Linda found me later near the east hallway, right outside the supply room. She looked pale, her breath shallow like she'd been running. "Don't eat or drink anything from staff you don't know," she said, barely above a whisper. I raised an eyebrow. "You think Caleb would actually go that far?" She didn't answer, just looked at me. That silence said everything. Then she slipped something into my hand. A sealed envelope, no hospital letterhead, just 3 words written in my father's shaky, familiar script. "For your eyes only." I didn't open it right away. I waited until I was alone. The hospital chapel was empty, dimly lit by the soft orange hue of a stained glass window that always reminded me of fire. I sat in the back pew, the envelope clutched in both hands like it might disappear if I blinked. I slid my finger under the seal and opened it slowly, like I was unfolding something sacred. Inside was a single page. His handwriting, uneven but unmistakable. If you are reading this, it means I sensed something long before it happened. Protect the Drayton Foundation. It's the one thing that cannot fall into his hands. My breath hitched. He knew. He didn't just suspect. He knew. The paper trembled in my hands. I could almost hear his voice reading the words aloud, not the version of him from his hospital bed, but the version who used to sit at the kitchen table at 6 a.m., sharp as ever, tapping a teaspoon against a porcelain mug. His letter wasn't long, but it was enough. Enough to make it clear that Caleb's betrayal wasn't sudden. It had been calculated for years. Every advisor my brother brought into the foundation, every revision to the contracts, the subtle reshuffling of board seats. All of it had been laying the groundwork. He didn't just want the money. He wanted the power, the name, the control. He wanted the Drayton legacy to start and end with him. I folded the letter carefully and tucked it into my coat pocket. There were still tears pressing against the back of my eyes, but they weren't the same kind as before. They weren't about loss. They were about rage and clarity. For the first time since that night, I wasn't confused or scared. I was ready. I pulled out my phone and opened a new message. To Linda, "Meet me tonight. We start collecting evidence." I stared at the screen for a moment before hitting send. I didn't have a full plan yet, but I had a purpose, and that was enough. As I slipped out of the chapel and made my way back toward the main floor, my phone buzzed again. No contact name, just a number. The message read, "He knows you're looking." I stopped walking. The hallway around me buzzed with life. Nurses, carts, intercoms. But none of it felt real. I looked up and down the corridor. Someone was watching. Someone always had been. That night, I found out exactly how far he was willing to go. The hallway outside the ICU was dimmer than usual. The lights above me flickered, slow and rhythmic, like a warning I hadn't learned to read yet. I stood there, leaning against the pale green wall, listening to the steady beep of machines behind the door. It should have been comforting. Instead, it felt rehearsed, like someone had set the scene too carefully. Then I noticed something. The security camera above the ICU, the one I'd passed every day for a week, wasn't blinking. The small red recording light was dark, dead. But now, it was glowing, faint, steady. Either someone forgot to turn it off, or someone turned it back on. I didn't have time to think about it too much before Caleb arrived. He strolled up like he hadn't a care in the world, dressed in one of those perfectly pressed shirts he always wore when he wanted to play the grieving son on camera. He carried 2 paper coffee cups. "You should go home," he said, offering one to me. "You look terrible." I managed a tight smile. "I'll leave when Dad wakes up." He raised an eyebrow and held the cup out a little farther. "It's decaf. No tricks." Linda's voice echoed in my mind. "Don't eat or drink anything from staff you don't know." I didn't know what Caleb had slipped into the cup, if anything at all, but the risk wasn't worth the sip. "I'm fine," I told him, folding my arms. He shrugged, like it didn't matter either way, and dropped his own cup into the trash bin. "Suit yourself." He didn't walk away. Not yet. I turned to leave, just wanting a few seconds alone, but he stepped in closer, too close, his tone dipping low. "You've always tried to be the good one, haven't you?" he said softly. Dad's helper, the daughter who remembered appointments, showed up on time, smiled when no one else did. I said nothing. He leaned closer. I could feel his breath on my cheek. "But the truth is, you were never loved, Maribel. Just useful." Something inside me shifted. My skin flushed, but not from shame, from fury. I turned and looked him square in the eyes. For the first time, I didn't flinch. "And what does that make you, Caleb?" I asked, voice low. His smirk came slowly. "The one who wins." He stepped back, smug and slow, and walked toward the elevators. I stood frozen. Then my eyes drifted up to the camera again. That small red light blinked, once, twice, recording. Had he forgotten it was on? Or was someone making sure it was? Whatever the reason, I kept my expression blank, my body still. But inside, I was burning. Linda's warning came back in full, not as fear, but as timing. She hadn't told me to wait because she was scared. She told me to wait because the camera needed to be rolling. I whispered to myself, "Let it all record." I stepped away from the door, giving myself room to breathe. I had enough air now, to think. For most of my life, I had let him dictate who I was. The quiet one, the helper, the outsider. But not anymore. Not after seeing my name stripped from the will. Not after watching him fake sympathy on national TV. Not after realizing he was willing to risk everything, even murder, to secure power. No, this was different now. I wasn't waiting for Dad to wake up to protect him. I was here to expose the truth, and I needed evidence. That blinking red light was step 1. The elevator dinged behind me, drawing my eyes. Linda stepped out, her eyes wide, her body tense. She walked fast but didn't run, trying not to attract attention. "They're speeding things up," she said quietly, pulling me into the alcove near the vending machines. "Your father's being transferred to private care tonight. Not ICU, a facility in Sugarland." I blinked. "Why?" She pulled out a crumpled paper from her coat. "The transfer documents, signed by you." My chest tightened. "My signature?" Linda gave one slow nod. "Forged. It's dated yesterday." I stared at the page, at the fake signature in my handwriting, my own handwriting, copied and pasted into a plan I hadn't seen, hadn't approved. Caleb was moving fast now, too fast, trying to get ahead of the blinking red light. I folded the paper and tucked it into my coat. This wasn't just about erasing me from the will anymore. By morning, they would erase me from more than just the paperwork. They'd erase me from the story itself. But I wasn't going to let them. I found the folder just after 5 a.m., tucked beneath a stack of sloppy intake forms and old memos that smelled faintly of disinfectant and stale coffee. The top sheet was folded and warped from a spill. The ink bled along the edges, but the words still stood clear. Estate plan revision. My name was there, at the bottom, sort of. Signed M. Drayton, the looping M. The slight lean to the right. The kind of slant you'd get if you signed something at a front desk in a rush. It looked exactly like my handwriting, but I knew better. I hadn't signed a damn thing. I stood frozen in the hospital records room, the silence pressing in, and tried to steady my breath. A young man behind the counter, maybe early 20s, hair pushed back with a plastic headband, looked up at me, chewing gum like he had all the time in the world. "Your brother said you authorized the transfer," he said, shrugging like that explained everything. I looked at him, dead in the eye. He lied. The kid hesitated, just for a second, then went back to typing something into his terminal. "We just follow orders, ma'am." Ma'am. My chest tightened as I stepped away. They all thought I was in on it, that I had signed the orders, cleared the paperwork, let Caleb take control. The thought twisted in my stomach. I fumbled with my phone as I walked, trying to pull up the texts, the long thread with my father, the one where he'd asked about the medications Caleb had ordered, the way he'd expressed worry in carefully coded words. But it was gone. Not just that message, the entire thread. Every text, every image, every call log from the last 3 weeks. Wiped clean. My fingers trembled. I scrolled again, this time looking through my archived conversations, even searching his number directly. Nothing. Except for one message, from Caleb, dated exactly 2 weeks ago. "Stop worrying. Dad's fine. Focus on your own life for once." I felt the phone shaking in my hand. My voice came out in a whisper I barely recognized. "You deleted everything." Someone brushed past me and I flinched. "Maribel!" It was Linda, breathless, gripping my arm. "They're doing it now. Boardroom, 2nd floor. The meeting started 15 minutes ago. He's pushing the transfer." I didn't wait for more. I took off down the corridor, my shoes slipping slightly on the polished linoleum. My mind raced ahead of my steps. I didn't know what I'd find, but I knew I had to stop it. I rounded the corner fast and, smack, a nurse collided into me. Her tray clattered, a large coffee spilling across the white tile floor. "Sorry," she stammered, dropping to her knees. "It's fine," I said quickly, bending down with her. I reached for a napkin from the tray when I saw it. A corner of paper just barely sticking out from under the spill. A familiar corner, waterlogged and yellowing. I slid it out, carefully, flipping it open as the nurse hurried to clean up. The title hit me first. Power of Attorney Transfer. Executor, Caleb Drayton. The coffee had smeared part of the ink, but I could still read enough. Effective immediately. Family approval assumed. Signature, M. Sir Drayton. Again, my name, my handwriting, my forged compliance. Linda arrived at my side just as I stood. She took one look at the paper and exhaled sharply. "He's not just covering his tracks," she said, voice low. "He's burying you with him." We stepped aside as the nurse mopped the spill. I stared at the paper in my hand, the coffee-stained edges, the bureaucratic phrasing, the precise impersonation. This wasn't an oversight. This was intention. A methodical, silent erasure, written in bureaucracy and coffee. Something shifted in me. My heart still pounded, but I wasn't trembling anymore. "He thinks this is his advantage," I murmured, "but it's mine." Linda tilted her head. "He underestimates invisible people," I said. I pulled out my phone, snapped photos of every page, front and back, then uploaded them to a private cloud drive I'd set up last night. I sent a backup to a lawyer friend in Chicago. No subject, no context, just in case. Linda gave me a look. "Are you sure you want to keep going?" I nodded. "I've played by the rules my whole life. I'm done." She gave me a faint, proud smile. "Then I'm with you." We didn't speak on the walk back toward the ICU. I kept checking over my shoulder. watching for Caleb or anyone who might be following us. The halls had quieted again, the night shift thinning out, replaced by sleepy-eyed early staff. As we neared the elevator, my phone buzzed. A new voicemail, no caller ID, just unknown. I pressed play. My father's voice came through, cracked and weak, recorded through a hospital room speaker. "Maribel, if you're hearing this, trust no one with the red folder." That was all. The message ended, and the world narrowed. I didn't even know there was a red folder, until I saw who was carrying it. There he was, Caleb, stepping out of our father's room like he owned the air in his lungs. And there, clutched to his chest like a newborn, was a leather folder, deep red, worn at the corners. I'd never seen it before, but something about it felt instantly familiar. That wasn't hospital issue. That wasn't part of any transfer file. That was my father's. My legs moved before my mind caught up. I followed him silently, footsteps soft on the polished linoleum. Caleb didn't look back. His shoulders were squared, his pace unhurried. I expected him to head down, maybe to his car or another department. But instead, he pressed the button for the top floor, the rooftop. The elevator doors slid shut behind him. I stood still, my hand hovering near the call button, heartbeat thumping in my ears. Something told me to walk away, but something stronger kept me rooted. I pressed the button. The elevator hummed, slow and steady, pulling me up into the silence I'd been avoiding for years. The doors opened to cool night air. The hospital's rooftop was dimly lit by amber floodlights that cast long, strange shadows against the vents and railings. Caleb stood by the edge, his back to me. The wind tugged at his coat, and the red folder gleamed under the lights like a warning flare. "You shouldn't be here," he said, without turning. I stepped onto the gravel. "That folder doesn't belong to you." He turned halfway, his expression unreadable. "Doesn't it? You really think he trusted you enough to give you the real one?" My brow furrowed. "The real one." He chuckled. "God, Mari, you always confused love with trust. Thought if you did enough, errands, appointments, hand-holding, you'd finally be let in." His tone shifted, bitter. "But love isn't trust, it's control, and Dad played you better than he ever played me." He waved the folder slightly, like he was showing off a prize. He was going to change everything, strip the board, restructure the foundation, leave it all to his precious, good daughter. He spat the words. I swallowed hard. "You were going to lose your place." His jaw clenched. "I built that place. While you were busy being agreeable, I was fixing his disasters, the lawsuits, the angry donors, the taxes. You think any of that was easy?" "But it wasn't enough, was it?" I stepped closer. "So you made sure he couldn't finish it." He didn't answer right away, just looked out over the city skyline like it might offer absolution. Then finally, "He was already dying," he said flatly. "I just sped up the inevitable." The words hung in the air like fog, and for the first time his voice cracked. Not from regret, from weariness. "All my life, I've been cleaning up after him. You got the softness, the praise, the doting. I got the rot." "You turned yourself into this," I whispered. He glanced at me, something wounded flickering behind his eyes. "He made me this way." For a split second, I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. But then I remembered the voicemail. My father's voice, weak, urgent. "Trust no one with the red folder." And I remembered the camera, the blinking red light in the ICU hallway, the one he didn't know had been recording. I shifted my weight, grounding myself. "You're right, Caleb," I said, tone even. "Dad made us both into something." His eyes narrowed. "What are you getting at?" I didn't answer with words. I pulled out my phone, pressed play. The rooftop went still. From the tiny speaker, his voice rang out, Clear, unfiltered, damning. He was already dying, I just sped up the inevitable. His face drained, his lips parted slightly, but no words came out. The wind gusted, lifting the edges of his coat. For once, Caleb didn't have a comeback. I took a slow step back toward the elevator, the phone still in my hand. "You always wanted control," I said quietly. "Now you've lost it, on camera." He didn't follow. He just stood there, frozen under the night sky, the red folder still clutched to his chest, like he couldn't decide whether to hold it tighter or throw it off the roof. The elevator doors opened. I stepped inside. As they closed, I saw his figure blur into the amber light. By dawn, the hospital was swarming with police. And I realized he wasn't done fighting. I thought it would feel like closure, watching them take Caleb away, but it didn't, not even close. I stood just inside the waiting area, arms crossed, trying to ignore the pounding in my chest. A young officer walked up and handed me a small folded slip of paper. "This was found in his pocket. It's for you," he said before turning away. The handwriting stopped me cold. It was my father's. He's not the only one. That was all it said. But it hit harder than any confession Caleb had given the night before. I stood there, motionless, staring down at the shaky pen strokes like they might rearrange themselves into something less terrifying. The morning sun filtered through the windows, casting a harsh glare across the floor. Everything felt sharper. The smell of antiseptic, the static crackle of walkie-talkies, the quiet shuffling of staff trying not to look directly at me. From across the hall, I saw two officers seal the red folder into an evidence bag and walk it toward the elevator. Watching them handle it like toxic material made something twist in my stomach. I should have felt victorious, but all I felt was dread. "Maribel." I turned. Linda stood a few feet away, her eyes hollow, her voice barely above a whisper. "You need to see something." She didn't wait for me to answer, just turned and began walking, and I followed. We wound our way through the quieter wings of the hospital, past the break room, past administration, until we reached the legal office tucked behind frosted glass. Linda held the door open for me. Inside, the room was still. She pulled out a chair, sat, and opened a folder. "Copies of the revised estate plan," she said, "the one they submitted for filing last week." I glanced at the first few pages. Same headers, same format, same language. "This is what Caleb forged." Linda didn't flinch. "Look at the last page." I flipped to the end. His name, of course, scrawled in bold strokes. And then, beneath it, just barely legible, a faint signature in a rushed, narrow script. "Linda Hastings." My stomach dropped. "You signed it," she nodded. "He said he'd ruin me. Report me for malpractice, falsify complaints, pull records. He had the means, and I believed he'd do it. You helped him." Tears welled in her eyes. I thought, if I went along, I could buy time, find something to stop him later, but I waited too long. I pushed the papers back across the desk, my hands trembling. "You knew everything." "I didn't know about the poisoning," she said quickly. "Not until last week. After your father's first seizure, I tried to speak up, but Caleb intercepted the message. That night, I stopped you in the hall. He was inside. If I'd let you in—" She pulled a small flash drive from her coat pocket and held it out to me. "What's this?" "Everything I have, emails, bank transfers, a shipping order for a sedative under a fake doctor ID, and something else, something I copied off the hospital server 2 nights ago." I didn't take it right away. I just stared at it, that little silver stick, no bigger than a car key, but heavy with the weight of a dozen betrayals. "You were part of it," I said, almost too softly to hear myself. Linda didn't try to defend herself. She looked down at the floor, nodding slowly. "I know. But you're the only one who never stopped believing in him. That's why I'm giving this to you, to fix what I helped break." She stood up and left me alone in the room. I sat in silence for a moment, just breathing. Then I walked down the hall to the security office, the only place with a computer that wasn't connected to Caleb's firewall. The nurse on duty barely glanced up as I explained. She handed me a key and pointed me toward the back terminal. I shut the door behind me, slid the flash drive into the USB port, and waited. Folders loaded slowly. First, financial statements. A spreadsheet of offshore transfers. Then emails between Caleb and someone using an encrypted address under the alias Drayton Air. And finally, at the bottom of the list, a video file. Time-stamped, 2 days before my father's stroke. I clicked it open. The footage was grainy, but there he was, my father, sitting upright in his hospital bed, eyes glassy but aware. He looked straight into the camera. "Maribel," he said, voice thin. "If you're seeing this, then Caleb tried, but he's not the only one. Someone else wants the foundation gone." I leaned forward, hands gripping the sides of the desk. He coughed, paused, then continued. "I don't know who I can trust anymore. They think I'm too far gone to notice, but I see things. Conversations cut off when I walk in, nurses whispering, my signature on papers I've never read." My breath caught in my throat. Behind him, a figure moved, just a blur in the corner of the screen. They walked past the glass wall of the room, paused for a second, then continued on. I squinted at the uniform, a white coat, hospital badge. As the figure turned slightly, the light hit the name tag. It glinted just enough for me to catch it. Dr. M. Hastings. Then the screen went black. I sat there for a full minute, unmoving. Linda wasn't the only Hastings working at that hospital. I followed the hallway directory toward the administrative wing. My steps were quiet, but the echo of my thoughts was anything but. I'd seen the name. I'd seen the coat. I knew what I had to do, even if every instinct in me wanted to turn back. His nameplate read, Dr. Marcus Hastings, Director of Clinical Ethics. The door creaked open with a gentle push. What I saw stopped me cold. Piles of documents, some still unfiled, covered the desk. Diplomas lined the wall in tidy frames. But what made my knees lock wasn't any of that. It was the photograph, centered above his chair. My father and Dr. Marcus Hastings, arms around each other like old college friends, grinning into the past. So this was what Dad had tried to protect. The weight of it settled in my chest, familiar and unwelcome. I didn't hear him enter until the door clicked shut behind me. "I wondered when you'd come," he said, as if greeting a guest. He held a paper coffee cup like it was any other Tuesday. I turned slowly to face him. "You were working with Caleb?" He set the cup on the side table. "Working for Caleb? No, not quite. We had an arrangement, a mutual understanding." He circled the desk casually, like this was just another meeting. "Your father's estate was deeply tied to the hospital's foundation. When he threatened to pull the endowment, everything I'd built here, the outreach programs, the clinical expansions, all of it was on the chopping block." He gestured loosely toward the windows. "So, yes, I helped. We all did what we had to do." My voice wavered, but I kept it steady. "You poisoned him." Marcus tilted his head, almost amused. "Oh no, that was all Caleb. I just made sure the story matched the outcome. Nobody likes paperwork that contradicts reality." I took a step forward. "You destroyed his name for money." His expression hardened. "No, I preserved what he was too proud to understand. Legacy isn't about ideals. It's about structure. He wanted to pass the foundation to you, a woman with no background in operations, no experience in leadership. That wasn't loyalty. That was lunacy. You're twisting everything." He laughed. "You think love and truth matter in this world? They're liabilities. I built something real. You're just sentimental." The fury behind my ribs simmered into something cold. I stepped closer. Power isn't preserving, it's perverting. His smile vanished. "What now, Ms. Drayton?" he asked, voice sharper. "You going to call the cops? Tell them what? That a grieving daughter with a long history of family trauma is making wild accusations against a decorated physician?" I tilted my head, almost mirroring him. "I don't need them to believe me." He frowned. I pulled out my phone and tapped the screen. The video played loud and clear, the room suddenly filled with my father's weary voice. "Maribel, if you see this, it means Caleb tried. But there's another. Someone else wants the foundation destroyed. Don't let them bury what I built in the name of care." Marcus's posture stiffened. His fingers twitched. "Where did you—" I didn't let him finish. "In the red folder," I said. "You should have checked twice." His eyes darted around the room, calculating. I'd seen that look before, in courtrooms, in boardrooms, but this time he was off balance. He lunged forward, hands outstretched, going for the phone. I pivoted sideways just as the door burst open. 2 hospital security officers pushed into the room, with Linda right behind them. Her eyes were swollen but resolute. "I told them everything," she said. Marcus stumbled backward, his hands raised as the officers advanced. "You don't understand what you've done," he hissed at Linda. "You've destroyed more than just your career." But she didn't flinch. They cuffed him and led him out without another word. The room fell quiet again. I looked down at the phone in my hand. The screen had gone dark, but the echo of my father's voice still hung in the air. That evening, after everything settled, I sat alone in my father's study. The house was still. That strange, unfamiliar stillness of aftermath. Not peace, just the absence of movement. The grandfather clock ticked in the corner, its rhythm both comforting and unbearable. I reached into the drawer and pulled out my phone again. There was one voicemail I had never deleted. I pressed play. "Mari," my father's voice murmured, "if you're listening, I know I've made mistakes. I didn't always say what needed to be said, but you were always the heart of this family. Protect it, even from us." I closed my eyes. This time the tears came, but they didn't sting. I reached for the red folder, still sealed, and placed it gently in the drawer beside his desk. I turned the key and slid it closed. "For once," I whispered, "the silence belongs to me." Outside, the wind carried the faint hum of the city, steady, indifferent, and alive, just like him.